4:25. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, some Bibles say ditch, even in times of distress. Now let me stop there and say, what is Gabriel saying? He's saying from the time that a decree is issued to go back and build Jerusalem, rebuild it, you need to know there are going to be 2 periods. One is going to be 49 years long. And then there's going to be a 434-year period. Then Messiah will come. Now let me step over here. Here's Daniel in captivity. Okay? Jeremiah said it'd be 70 years. Now Gabriel has come. This is where Daniel's praying. And he said, know this, that there's going to be a decree issued to rebuild Jerusalem. It's going to be in the future, but look for it. So in 445 BC, and you can go and read about it in Nehemiah chapter 2. Nehemiah was the king's servant. Have you ever read Nehemiah? And he was sad. He's going around like this. He's serving, he's a slave. And he's not happy. And he goes and he's serving the king. And the king says, Nehemiah, how come you're so sad all the time? And Nehemiah says something like this to the king, or Xerxes. He says, how can I be happy when Jerusalem's laying in ruins? And here I am, and nobody's doing anything about the rebuilding of the city. This is our home. All of the Jewish people who are here, whose sons and daughters are marrying with your people, we're losing our identity, and I'm sad about that. And goats and chickens are running over the Temple Mount. How can I be happy? So the king of Persia says, well, I'll tell you what, we can fix that. You go back and build it, and then come back and tell me about it. So he issues a decree in 445 BC. And Nehemiah and Ezra, those 2 books, detail the taking back of the Jewish people over to Jerusalem to rebuild Jerusalem. And in the book of Nehemiah, that's what that book's about, rebuilding Jerusalem. And it takes them 49 years to get it built. But when they rebuild it and dedicate it after that 49-year period, this first group of 7 weeks is complete. Jerusalem's rebuilt. And the Jews have returned. Now they reinstitute sacrifice in the new temple. This is not the Temple of Solomon. This is just kind of a temporary temple. And they begin to sacrifice to the Lord in the place where they're supposed to do it. That's 49 years. Then Gabriel says there will be another period of 62 weeks of years, which is 434 years. And what's going to happen there is Messiah is going to come. Who's Messiah? Jesus. Messiah is going to come, and then he's going to be cut off. He's going to be killed. He's going to be rejected. I'm sure Daniel is saying, now, what? This causes him to fall into a stupor and a kind of grief that's profound. But Gabriel says, after 483 years, that's what this adds up to, Messiah is going to come, but he's going to be rejected and cut off. But you see, this completes 483 years. And the last week of 7 years isn't going to come until here. Because, and I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I'm up here. Because when Messiah is cut off, God shifts for a while his emphasis to the church, to Gentiles, so that they may be saved, so that we can get saved and hear the message of grace. Aren't we glad?
Amen.
This is a parenthesis in God's program of history. It's all in the Bible. It's in the book of Daniel. It's in the book of Revelation. The church age is detailed in chapters 2 and 3 in the book of Revelation. And this 2,000 years so far is going to end when this last 7 years of Jewish history begins, and that is called the Great Tribulation period. So let me go back to the Bible. Well, I'm going to come back over there in a minute. But it says, Messiah the Prince, this is verse 25, until Messiah the Prince there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again, that is Jerusalem, with the plaza and the moat, even in times of distress. It's going to be tough. There's going to be wars, but it's going to get rebuilt. Verse 26, then after 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. I need to stop right there and say that's a reference to Jesus. The Messiah is in Greek, what word? What is Messiah in Greek? Hebrew, it's Messiah. In Greek, there's another word for it. Christ. Christ. So we could read it this way. Then after 62 weeks, Christ will be cut off and have nothing. So, after 483 years, Christ comes, the Messiah comes, but he'll be cut off and have no reign there. Going to be cut off. And that's what happened, wasn't it? Jesus came, and he came into Jerusalem, and he had a triumphal entry, but less than a week later, they turned against him and crucified him. Now let me say something to you, and I want to show you a book that I've wanted for a long time. One of the men in my Bible study somehow got his hands on this book for me. If you take 490 years from 445 BC, it's not going to come out to exactly the date when Christ came into Jerusalem using our calendar, the Roman calendar. But if you use the old Hebrew calendar, which had 360 days in a year, not 365, it comes exactly to the day when Jesus came into Jerusalem. That is the subject of this book called The Coming Prince, and it's by Sir Robert Anderson. He did an exhaustive study on Hebrew time and prophecy. It's called a prophetic year. It has 360 days, and biblical Hebrew prophecy marked the year as 360 days, not 365, because they kind of had a leap year, a festival year every once in a while that wasn't counted in the calendar. Amazing subject of this book. But if you use a 360-day year from the time of the issuing of that decree until Jesus came into Jerusalem, it was exactly the day of his entry into
Palm
Jerusalem.
Sunday entry?
Yes.
What we call
Yes.
Palm Sunday.
And I've read excerpts from this book, and I always wanted to get one. I never could find it. One of the men in my Bible study said, well, I got it for you. I tried reading it, but he said it's a little complicated. But I've read a few pages, and this summer I'm going to try to read more. But I know this for sure, that the prophetic year was 360 days, not 365. And it marked Jesus coming into Jerusalem at exactly Palm Sunday from this date, which the month and the day is given in Nehemiah when the decree was issued. Hear what I'm saying? From the exact day to the exact day, 483 years being on the nose. It's amazing. Really.
So you really have to know Jewish as well as Gentile
Or you could, if you're Gentile, you could round it off and say he came in right at the end of 400. But if you're Hebrew, following 360-day year was exactly the day.
And yet they failed to recognize him.
And they cut him off. Yes.
Yeah, that was my question is, one of the things I've read in John MacArthur's commentary was that in the time of Christ there was a worldwide expectation for a Messiah. So everybody, not just the Jews, but everybody was looking for a Messiah. Is there any reference to the Jews going back to Daniel's prophecy and being aware that that was the time?
As a matter of fact, have you ever heard the name Leopold Kahn? Jewish guy. And I was reading about him in the late 1800s. He was studying Daniel's prophecy. And he couldn't make heads or tails of it because he kept reading and studying. And he went to a friend, a rabbi, and he said, if I'm right, the Messiah has already come. And the rabbi said, I don't have any answer for that. And Kahn began to say, the prophecy has to be correct. Messiah must have already come. And the closer he looked, he discovered, to his surprise, it was Jesus. And he was the founder of the modern messianic movement of Jews as Christians in Christian churches. Amazing. And by the way, Sir Isaac Newton, we were talking about him. In his Journal Theologica, I read a little reference in David Jeremiah's book about what he said. He said in the last days, and I'm talking about this period, there will come a group of men who take hold of Daniel's prophecy and reconstruct the scheme of God's purpose and will for the earth. And that's exactly what has happened in the last 50, 75 years. People have put all this together. Before that, it was kind of a mystery. But now Daniel's prophecy, which was sealed up to the end of the age, we think by spiritual intent, has been reopened. And John, in the book of Revelation, clarifies it. But let me say something. We need to read the end of the chapter, and then let me finish by pointing out a couple of things. It says, then after 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of, now it's going to talk about another prince. And the people of the prince who is to come, who is this prince? Antichrist. Okay, this is a little p. The people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war, desolations are determined. And he, verse 27, will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Now notice, in verse 27, this is very important. Antichrist will be identified by making a covenant with the many, means the Jews, with Israel. He will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Now, how long is 1 week? In biblical terms, 7 years. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction. One is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Now, all that means this. It's talking about the prince who is to come.